Imagine a home so big, so lavish, that it seems like a dream come true. But inside, it hides a dark secret: 21 children, all living under one roof, with no one to protect them. Guojun, Xuan and Silvia Zhang had it all: a successful business, a beautiful mansion in Arcadia, California, and a life that seemed perfect. But behind the luxury and smiles, they were hiding a nightmare that would shock the world. How did two people manage to bring 21 children into their lives without anyone noticing? And why did no one question what was really happening behind closed doors? Stay tuned, because the truth is about to get a whole lot darker. Guojun, Xuan and Silvia Zhang were the picture of success. They had it all, the kind of life most people dream about. Their mansion in Arcadia, California, looked like something straight out of a magazine, complete with grand rooms, expensive furniture, and a sense of luxury that made it clear money was no object. They were known in their community, admired for their seemingly perfect family, and respected for running a successful surrogacy business that promised to help other families fulfill their dreams of having children. Xuan and Zhang weren't just any couple, they were business savvy, with a company called Mark Surrogacy Investment LLC. Their business was well known, offering women the chance to be surrogate mothers while making money. For those who couldn't have children of their own, Xuan and Zhang's company seemed like a godsend, helping them build the family they always wanted. The couple's image was spotless, and they had built a life full of promises, success, and wealth. On the outside, they seemed like the perfect couple, living the American dream. They were always seen at fancy events, socializing with the right people, and enjoying the perks of their hard work. To the public, they had everything together. No one could have guessed that behind the walls of their fancy home, something deeply wrong was happening. What looked like the perfect life was hiding a much darker secret that no one could have imagined. And that secret would change everything. Their life of success was built on a foundation that, as it turned out, wasn't just fragile, it was dangerous. Xuan and Zhang's world, full of wealth and luxury, would soon come crashing down as the truth behind their perfect life began to surface. What appeared to be a dream was hiding something that would shock everyone. Mark Surrogacy Investment LLC, the business that Guojun, Xuan and Silvia Zhang built, seemed like a beacon of hope for many people. To outsiders, it looked like a well-organized, reputable company designed to help those who struggled with infertility. The couple promoted their agency as a way to help families grow, offering women the opportunity to become surrogates and bring children into the world for couples who couldn't have them on their own. It appeared to be a noble cause, one that promised to provide a loving home for children while giving women the chance to earn money. For years, Xuan and Zhang ran this business like clockwork. They had all the right paperwork, a sleek website, and glowing testimonials from happy clients. Everything about it seemed above board, professional, and trustworthy. Their surrogacy agency was touted as a success, helping dozens of families fulfill their dreams of becoming parents. The couple enjoyed the benefits of being seen as responsible business owners and were respected in their community for their work. But underneath the polished exterior of their business, a far darker truth was hiding. While the couple's surrogacy agency appeared legitimate on the surface, it became clear that it was built on a system that was exploiting women and potentially trafficking children. The idea of surrogacy was twisted, as it became more about making money than creating families. What many didn't know was that Xuan and Zhang were using their business as a front for something far more dangerous. Rather than simply helping people grow their families, the couple was allegedly taking advantage of women who were promised fair compensation but were often misled or kept in the dark about the true nature of their surrogacy agreements. The women who worked with them thought they were helping a couple expand their family, but in reality, they were part of a business plan that involved numerous children being born to fulfill an unsettling demand. One that went far beyond simply helping other families. As the investigation deepened, it became clear that the couple was involved in more than just the business of surrogacy, they were involved in a potential human trafficking operation. The children born through this agency were not just a product of loving, planned pregnancies. They were part of a much larger, disturbing plan to make money at any cost, exploiting both women and children in the process. Xuan and Zhang's agency, which once seemed like a genuine way to help others, was now under scrutiny for being a part of something far more exploitative than anyone could have ever imagined. The dark reality behind their business was just beginning to come to light, and the shocking truth about what was really happening behind closed doors would change everything. It all began with an innocent baby, just 2 months old. This child, who should have been surrounded by love and care, was rushed to the hospital with a severe head injury. The doctors, alarmed by the extent of the trauma, immediately suspected foul play. It wasn't just a simple accident, something more was going on. This was the incident that would spark an investigation that would reveal horrors no one saw coming. The authorities were quickly alerted, and what followed was a deep dive into the family's life. As they dug into the situation, questions began to arise about the child's care. Who was looking after the baby? How did this injury happen? The answers, however, weren't coming from the family, they came from someone who had been in the home all along, the nanny. The nanny, who had been trusted to care for the child, was at the center of the investigation. It was clear that the injury wasn't an accident. She was soon identified as the person responsible for shaking the baby violently, causing the traumatic injury. Surveillance footage obtained from inside the home revealed a chilling scene, the nanny shaking and striking the infant, her actions deliberate and cruel. This footage was shocking, and it painted a disturbing picture of what was really happening in the home. As the authorities continued to review the footage and interview those involved, the full scope of the situation began to emerge. The couple's seemingly perfect life began to crack, and the truth started to come out. This one incident, the injury of a helpless baby, was the catalyst for what would become a much larger investigation into the couple's lives. The footage made it clear that this wasn't just a case of neglect. This was abuse. And as the investigation progressed, it became apparent that the abuse wasn't isolated to just one child. It was part of a much bigger story, one that would take the authorities deeper into the couple's business and personal lives than they could have ever imagined. The true extent of the cruelty and manipulation was just beginning to surface. What started as an investigation into a single child's injury soon escalated into something far more disturbing. As law enforcement worked to uncover the full scope of the case, a chilling discovery was made: there were 21 children living in the couple's sprawling home. The investigators, initially focused on the abuse of the 2-month-old infant, began to piece together a much darker reality as they searched the house. What they found was more than just one child in danger, it was a house full of children, all living under the same roof, most of them under 3 years old. The sight of so many young children, each with their own stories, was something no one could have expected. The children's ages ranged from just a few months old to 13 years old. But it was the babies, those under the age of 3, that left investigators horrified. Many of them had been born through the couple's surrogacy business, and none of them appeared to have any proper care or attention. There was no loving family environment, no safe space where they could grow up and feel secure. Instead, they were part of a larger, much darker plan that had been hidden from the world for far too long. Law enforcement, who were already shaken by the baby's injury, were now stunned by what they discovered. They knew something had been wrong, but this was beyond anything they could have imagined. The sight of so many young children, all with their futures uncertain, was enough to leave even the most seasoned officers speechless. These children were being raised in a house where their well-being was never the priority. Their safety, their happiness, their futures, none of it seemed to matter to Xuan and Zhang. The discovery shocked not only the authorities but the entire community. People in Arcadia, who had once admired the couple for their apparent success, now found themselves in disbelief. How could someone in their community, someone who seemed so successful and well-liked, be involved in something so horrific? This revelation left everyone questioning how something like this could happen so close to home. As the truth began to come to light, the community struggled to understand how Xuan and Zhang could hide this reality from everyone for so long. How could these children have been living in such conditions without anyone noticing? The more investigators uncovered, the clearer it became: this was not a case of neglect or poor judgment. It was a deliberate, calculated scheme that involved the lives of 21 innocent children. And the real shock was just beginning. After the shocking discovery of the 21 children living in their home, Guojun Xuan and Silvia Zhang were arrested, their perfect world crumbling around them. The charges they faced were grave: felony child endangerment and neglect. These charges were not just about a single incident, but about the years of exploitation and cruelty that had taken place behind the walls of their luxurious mansion. The couple, once seen as the epitome of success, were now facing the full force of the law, their lives upended in a matter of days. As the news of their arrest spread, the public reaction was one of outrage and disbelief. How could a couple, respected in their community, be capable of such horrific acts? Many had admired Xuan and Zhang for their successful business and their seemingly perfect life. But as the details of their actions became public, that admiration quickly turned into disgust. The once admired business owners were now the subjects of scorn, their names forever linked to a crime that shocked the entire nation. Despite the severity of the charges, the couple was released on bail. This move sparked further outrage among the public, many of whom felt that Xuan and Zhang should be held without bond, given the nature of their crimes. People were angry that the couple, who had caused so much harm to the children, were allowed to walk free while the investigation continued. The idea of them being allowed to return to their home, where so many children had suffered, was too much for many to bear. But while the couple may have been out on bail, the investigation was far from over. Law enforcement was still piecing together the full extent of their actions, and many questions remained unanswered. How long had this been going on? How many more victims were there? The investigation was complex, involving not just child abuse, but also the potential for trafficking, fraud, and other illegal activities tied to the surrogacy business. It was clear that there was much more to this story than anyone had realized. As the investigation unfolded, the public remained on edge, waiting for answers. Would Xuan and Zhang face the full consequences of their actions, or would they slip through the cracks? The case had already revealed a shocking amount of wrongdoing, but there was still so much more to uncover. The complexity of the situation meant that this was far from being a closed case, and people wanted justice. Not just for the children, but for the truth to come out. After the arrest of Guojun Xuan and Silvia Zhang, the fate of the 21 children they had kept hidden in their home became the main concern. These children, most of them under 3 years old, had been living in an environment where love, care, and basic safety were often neglected. The authorities knew that the children needed immediate protection, and so, they were swiftly placed into protective custody. The Department of Children and Family Services took charge of the children's care, ensuring they were moved to safe homes where they would no longer be in harm's way. The children were given new temporary guardians who would provide them with the basic care they had been denied: food, comfort, and safety. The change from the sterile, unsettling environment they had lived in to a space that was nurturing and supportive was immediately noticeable. For these young children, the transition was crucial. Many of them had never experienced a life outside the walls of the mansion they'd been kept in. They'd never known what it felt like to live in a place where they could play freely, sleep in peace, or receive the attention and affection every child deserves. Now, in protective custody, they began to experience what many of us might take for granted: a sense of safety, stability, and care. But while the children were finally free from the harmful environment they had known, the road to recovery was going to be long and challenging. The emotional and psychological impact on these children was profound. Many were too young to fully understand the situation, but as they grew, they would likely have questions about their past, about the parents who'd been arrested, and about the life they had left behind. Authorities were working closely with child psychologists and social workers to ensure that the children would have the support they needed to heal from the trauma they had endured. For the older children, there was the added complication of helping them make sense of the situation. They would need time to process what had happened, and finding a place where they could rebuild their sense of normalcy would take patience and care. Foster families, community organizations, and support groups were all brought in to help ease this transition. The future for these children was still uncertain. While they were now safe, the question of where they would live long-term and who would take responsibility for them remained. Would they be placed with extended family members, or would they need to be adopted? Social workers were already working hard to track down any potential family members who might be able to offer them a stable home. But even with the best care and the most loving families, it would be years before the full effects of their experiences could be understood. These children's futures, while now filled with hope, were still very much a work in progress. They had been robbed of the care every child deserves, but with the right resources, time, and love, they would hopefully begin to build the life they were always meant to have. This case has shed light on the vulnerability of children in situations where they're used for someone else's gain. The authorities were determined to ensure that these children would be given the chance to grow up in a world that cares for them, a world far removed from the one they had left behind. As the investigation into Guojun Xuan and Silvia Zhang's surrogacy business continued, more and more surrogate mothers began to speak out, sharing their heartbreaking stories of how they had been misled. These women, who had offered their bodies to help create families, were now finding themselves caught in a web of deception, confusion, and betrayal. One by one, the surrogate mothers came forward, telling their stories about how they were promised fair compensation and the opportunity to help a family in need. Some women had been told that they were carrying a sibling for a child the couple had already had, with the belief that their role was purely to help expand a family's happiness. They had no idea they were part of something much darker. These women had trusted Xuan and Zhang, believing they were working with a legitimate agency, only to discover later that the couple had been operating a business that used them, and their pregnancies, like a transaction. For many of these women, the emotions were overwhelming. They felt devastated, angry, and deeply betrayed. What they had thought was a simple arrangement to help another family had turned into something they couldn't have imagined. Some women had bonded with the children they carried, only to later find out that those children were being raised in a place they had never expected, without the care and love they thought they were providing. The sense of betrayal cut deep. These women had been led to believe they were helping children grow up in loving homes, only to learn that their actions had been exploited. One surrogate mother, named Sarah, shared her experience of how she had been convinced to carry a child for what she thought was a loving family. She recalled the warm meetings with Xuan and Zhang, the promises they made, and the reassurances that everything was being done the right way. "I thought I was doing something beautiful. I thought I was helping a family. I had no idea I was part of a scheme that would hurt so many people, including the child I carried," Sarah said, her voice breaking with emotion. Another surrogate mother, Maria, spoke of the confusion she felt when she was first told she was carrying a sibling for a child the couple already had. "They made it sound like such a simple thing. But when I heard about the 21 children, it made me question everything," Maria said. The realization that she had been part of something much bigger, something she never signed up for, was a punch to the gut. Like many others, she had been kept in the dark, believing her role was simply to help bring joy to a family. What made matters worse was the lack of transparency from Xuan and Zhang. They didn't tell the surrogates the full truth about what was happening behind the scenes. Instead of being open about the surrogacy process and the children's future, they manipulated the women, presenting a false picture of what they were participating in. These women were never told the full story of how many children were involved, how they were being raised, or what the real intentions of Xuan and Zhang were. The couple made sure to keep them in the dark, reassuring them with false promises that everything was above board. For these women, the emotional toll was heavy. They had carried these children with love and care, but now they were left wondering what happened to the babies they helped bring into the world. Some surrogates were determined to find the children they had carried, hoping to make sure they were safe and loved. They felt a deep connection to the children, and the thought that they might have been part of a situation that hurt them weighed heavily on their hearts. As the investigation continues, the stories of these surrogate mothers are being heard, shining a light on the exploitation that took place. Their voices are a crucial part of understanding the full scope of what happened and ensuring that no one else has to go through what they experienced. They are speaking out not just for themselves, but for the children who never had the chance to experience the love and care they deserved. When the details of Guojun Xuan and Silvia Zhang's arrest broke, the public was left reeling. Anger, disbelief, and sadness swept through communities across the country, as people tried to process the horror of what had happened in their own backyard. It was hard for anyone to fathom that a couple who seemed to have it all, running a successful business, living a lavish life, and appearing to care for children, could be responsible for something so terrible. Many found it difficult to believe the scale of the situation. How could something like this happen, especially under the guise of surrogacy, an act that's meant to be about helping others, not exploiting them? The shock quickly turned into anger, and it didn't take long for the public to demand accountability. News outlets played a significant role in spreading the story, amplifying the outrage. Headlines blasted across the front pages, drawing attention to the shocking discovery of 21 children and the cruel exploitation that had taken place. The coverage didn't just inform, it fueled the fire. Social media platforms, already buzzing with disbelief, became a battleground for emotions. People expressed their anger in countless posts, with some demanding that Xuan and Zhang be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. Others voiced their heartbreak for the children, wondering how anyone could subject them to such treatment. In just hours, petitions calling for justice flooded online spaces, gathering thousands of signatures from people who were outraged by the couple's actions. Justice for the children became a rallying cry. People were no longer just angry at Xuan and Zhang, they were calling for more oversight and regulation in surrogacy practices, something they believed was long overdue. The case, it seemed, was striking a chord in the hearts of many, stirring up deep concern about how such a business could operate unchecked for so long. One viral post on Twitter captured the public sentiment perfectly: how many more children will have to suffer before we make sure something like this can never happen again? The post quickly went viral, sparking conversations about the need for stronger protections for both surrogates and the children involved. Calls for more transparency and tighter regulations in the surrogacy industry grew louder, with many demanding that agencies like the one run by Xuan and Zhang face more scrutiny. People wanted to know how something this horrific could have been allowed to happen in the first place. On Facebook, parents shared their thoughts, some expressing their disbelief that Xuan and Zhang, who seemed to have the ideal family setup, could turn their business into a twisted scheme that hurt so many innocent lives. Others expressed their concern about how easy it was for the couple to deceive the public, surrogates, and clients alike. Many wanted answers. How did the system allow this to continue for so long? Why weren't there more safeguards in place to protect these vulnerable children and women? The outrage was palpable, but so was the sense of sadness. For those who had followed the case, it wasn't just about the criminals, it was about the innocent children whose lives had been shaped by exploitation. These children, many of whom had no idea what was going on, were the real victims. Social media users shared their sorrow for the children, imagining how difficult it must have been for them to grow up in a house that, instead of offering comfort and safety, offered only cruelty and neglect. This public outcry wasn't just about demanding justice for the children, it was also about making sure this didn't happen again. With more and more voices joining in, it was clear that people were pushing for change, pushing for stronger regulations in surrogacy, and making sure that every child involved in such processes would be protected from harm. The anger and sadness that had boiled over into the public reaction weren't just fleeting emotions, they were part of a growing movement demanding real change. As the investigation continued, the public was not willing to back down. They wanted justice for the children, answers for the surrogates, and, ultimately, a society that would never allow something like this to happen again. The cries for accountability were only growing louder, and with each passing day, the story reached more and more people who felt compelled to stand up and make their voices heard. The outrage had sparked a movement, and it wasn't going away until the truth was fully revealed. As shocking as the initial discoveries were, the investigation into Guojun Xuan and Silvia Zhang's surrogacy business is far from over. The more law enforcement digs into the case, the clearer it becomes that there's much more to uncover. What started as a simple investigation into child abuse quickly expanded into something much larger, with the full scope of the couple's operations still coming to light. The FBI has now joined the investigation, and with good reason. The scale of the surrogacy operation, which involved multiple children, surrogate mothers, and potentially illegal activities, has raised alarms at a federal level. This is no longer just a local case, it's a complex web of deceit, exploitation, and potentially criminal activities that crosses state lines and touches on issues of trafficking, fraud, and more. The FBI's involvement signals that authorities are treating this as a high-priority case, and they are determined to get to the bottom of it. Law enforcement is working tirelessly to trace every lead, interviewing former employees, surrogate mothers, and anyone else connected to the couple. The full extent of what was going on behind closed doors is still unclear, but investigators are piecing together a disturbing picture of how Xuan and Zhang's business operated. What started as a seemingly legitimate surrogacy service may have been a front for far more nefarious activities. Was it just about making money, or were there deeper, darker motivations at play? Only time will tell. One of the biggest concerns is the possibility of additional charges. While Xuan and Zhang currently face felony child endangerment and neglect charges, investigators are looking into whether there were other criminal activities tied to their surrogacy agency. Could there be charges related to trafficking, fraud, or even conspiracy? As more evidence comes to light, there's a real possibility that the couple could face additional charges that would add even more weight to the already serious allegations against them. In addition to the possible new charges against the couple, law enforcement is also looking at other individuals who may have been involved in this operation. The nanny, who was caught on video abusing one of the children, is currently facing charges, but she is still at large. Authorities are working hard to track her down, as she could hold key information about the couple's activities and the extent of the abuse. The investigation is also raising important questions about the surrogacy industry as a whole. The more authorities uncover about Xuan and Zhang's business, the more it becomes clear that there may be serious gaps in the regulations that govern surrogacy practices. Are other agencies operating in the same way, with little oversight? Could this be the tip of the iceberg, with more stories like this waiting to be discovered? The public outcry has made it clear that many people are demanding stronger protections for both surrogate mothers and the children born through these arrangements. As investigators continue to dig deeper, the story is far from finished. New developments are expected as they continue to follow the trail of evidence. The emotional toll on the surrogate mothers, the children, and everyone involved is enormous, and the case has sparked a larger conversation about the ethics of surrogacy and the protections that need to be in place to prevent exploitation. The full truth about what happened behind closed doors in Xuan and Zhang's home is still being uncovered, and as the investigation progresses, more answers are expected to emerge. But with so many moving parts, it's clear that this case is far from simple. The question of how these two individuals were able to manipulate the surrogacy system for their own gain, and how many more people might have been involved, is something that will likely take time to fully understand. But one thing is certain. The hunt for answers is only getting started. The case of Guojun Xuan and Silvia Zhang is not just a shocking crime, it's a wake-up call for the surrogacy industry and the need for greater protections for both children and surrogate mothers. What seemed like a simple business that helped families expand has now revealed a darker side of the surrogacy world, one that involves exploitation, deception, and possible human trafficking. This case forces us to ask tough questions about how surrogacy is regulated, and whether enough is being done to protect those who are vulnerable in the system. At its core, this case highlights the ethical and legal issues surrounding surrogacy. While surrogacy can be a beautiful way to help people build families, this story raises concerns about how easily the process can be exploited. Surrogates, who should be fully informed and treated with dignity, were misled about their role and the families they were helping. The children born through these arrangements were treated as products to be bought and sold, with their well-being and rights disregarded. This case has brought to light the need for stronger oversight and clear regulations that ensure the safety of all parties involved. For the surrogate mothers, this case is a painful reminder of how vulnerable they can be to manipulation. These women, who signed up to help others, were misled and kept in the dark about the true nature of the surrogacy process. They trusted that the agency they were working with would provide them with the necessary support and transparency, but instead, they became part of an operation built on lies. For many of them, the emotional toll of carrying a child for a family that wasn't the one they were led to believe in is unimaginable. Some of these mothers formed strong bonds with the children they carried, only to discover that those children were raised in an environment that was anything but loving and nurturing. On the other side of the equation, the children born through these surrogacy arrangements have been subjected to an unimaginable level of neglect. What should have been the beginning of a loving family story instead became a nightmare of abuse and exploitation. These innocent children were used as pawns in a business scheme, and their futures were compromised before they could even take their first steps. The impact on these children is immeasurable, and it raises a crucial point: who is protecting the children in the surrogacy system? What safeguards are in place to ensure their welfare once they are born? In light of the revelations in this case, lawmakers and advocacy groups are calling for a re-evaluation of surrogacy laws. Many are pushing for stricter regulations that would protect not only the children but also the surrogate mothers involved in these arrangements. This includes ensuring that surrogates are fully informed about the process, their rights, and the families they are working with. It also means putting in place clearer guidelines for what surrogacy agencies can and cannot do, with the aim of preventing the kind of abuse that occurred in this case. One major area of focus is transparency. Surrogacy agreements should be open and honest, with full disclosure about the intended parents, the process, and any potential risks. Surrogates need to be fully educated about what they're getting into and have the legal protections to ensure they are treated fairly. For children, the law should require regular oversight to ensure that they are being raised in safe environments, free from abuse or exploitation. The system needs to change to provide more checks and balances, ensuring that all parties involved, surrogates, parents, and children, are treated with respect and care. Additionally, human trafficking concerns must be addressed. This case has exposed the vulnerability of surrogate mothers, who can be manipulated into participating in something that's not just unethical but potentially illegal. Stronger laws to prevent human trafficking within the surrogacy industry, as well as international cooperation, may be necessary to protect women and children from being exploited across borders. Ultimately, this case forces us to question what kind of system we are allowing to exist. Surrogacy, in its ideal form, is a compassionate way to help people become parents. But without the right legal frameworks and protections in place, it can become a dangerous business, open to manipulation and abuse. It's clear that change is needed, not just to prevent another case like this from happening, but to ensure that surrogacy can be a safe, ethical process that truly benefits everyone involved, especially the children who are born through it. As the investigation continues and the case unfolds, the conversations about surrogacy regulation and human rights will only grow louder. The question now is, will society take the steps necessary to protect those who are most vulnerable in the surrogacy process? The answers are still uncertain, but one thing is clear. The need for change is urgent, and it's time to start making sure that those who are meant to help others are doing so with the care and responsibility that every child and surrogate mother deserves. As Guojun Xuan and Silvia Zhang face the mounting pressure of the public's outrage and the serious charges against them, their future is anything but certain. The legal journey ahead is sure to be complicated, with the couple now at the center of one of the most shocking cases to hit the surrogacy industry. Their arrest was just the beginning, and what happens next could determine not only their fate but the future of the surrogacy business itself. In the immediate future, the couple will likely face a lengthy court process. Given the gravity of the charges, child endangerment, neglect, and possibly more, the legal battles are bound to be intense. Their defense team will need to mount a vigorous fight to avoid the harshest penalties. However, the overwhelming evidence against them, including the footage of abuse and the discovery of 21 children in their home, suggests that their chances of walking away unscathed are slim. Prosecutors will be pushing hard for severe consequences, and given the scale of the alleged crimes, the public will be watching every move closely. Xuan and Zhang's fate in the court system will depend heavily on how the case is handled and the evidence presented. If convicted, they could face years in prison. The charges they are facing are serious, and the potential sentences are long, especially since the crime involves multiple victims, including vulnerable children. With each passing day, the mounting pressure for them to be held accountable for their actions grows stronger. Public opinion is firmly behind the idea that these individuals should not escape the consequences of their actions. The public's demand for justice for the 21 children has only increased as more details come to light, and many are calling for the maximum penalty under the law. But the consequences of this case won't just affect Xuan and Zhang personally. The ripple effects could be felt across the surrogacy industry. If the allegations are proven true, this could shake the very foundation of how surrogacy is regulated and practiced. The revelations from this case will likely prompt a wave of scrutiny aimed at other surrogacy agencies, leading to calls for stricter laws and regulations to protect both surrogates and the children involved in these arrangements. Many will wonder how such a system could have allowed Xuan and Zhang to operate unchecked for so long. There's no doubt that this case will fuel conversations about the need for greater oversight in the surrogacy industry, potentially leading to a complete overhaul of how surrogacy is conducted, both in the US and internationally. Additionally, this case may set a legal precedent. If Xuan and Zhang are found guilty, it could lead to tougher laws on surrogacy and trafficking, and stricter penalties for those found exploiting vulnerable people. As the investigation continues, authorities will likely dig deeper into the wider network of surrogacy agencies and individuals who may have been involved in similar practices. This case has the potential to expose a much larger problem within the industry, forcing lawmakers to take action and implement reforms to ensure that something like this never happens again. The consequences for Xuan and Zhang, if convicted, could be life-changing. But beyond that, their actions have cast a long shadow over the surrogacy community, forcing it to confront its flaws and vulnerabilities. For the sake of the children and the surrogates, the hope is that this case serves as a turning point, a moment when change is not just talked about but put into action. And as the legal process continues, the world will be watching, hoping for justice, and waiting to see what impact this case will have on the future of surrogacy. This case has shocked everyone: 21 children, a once respected couple, and a story full of lies, betrayal, and abuse. But what do you think? After everything that's been revealed, what should happen to Guojun Xuan and Silvia Zhang? Should they face the harshest penalties for their actions? Or is there more to the story than we know right now? We want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe the surrogacy industry needs to be completely overhauled? What kind of changes should we demand to protect the most vulnerable? Your opinion matters, and we want to know what you think about this devastating case. If you want to stay updated on this case as it develops, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We'll keep bringing you the latest updates, as well as deep dives into similar stories that demand our attention. And stay tuned, because in our next videos, we'll be looking at other stories that raise crucial questions about child welfare, human rights, and the justice system. From heartbreaking cases of neglect to criminal cases that shock the world, we'll continue exploring the stories that need to be told. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to share your thoughts. We'll see you in the next one.